Today I'll speak about language, culture, and thoughts. This presentation is prepared by MA candidate Noura Abdel Nabi, supervised by Dr. Barida Abbas. In this presentation, we will talk about the term culture and thoughts and their relation with the language. To avoid ambiguity, we must begin with some matters of terminology. First of all, we should know what is meant by culture. From this picture, we can see a simple definition of the term culture, which is the set of beliefs, values, practices that a group of people have in common. According to some anthropologists, cultures means something that everybody has, in contrast with the culture which is found only in cultured circles, in opera houses, universities, and the like. Many anthropologists use this term in a way that differs from one another. However, it always points to some features shared by a community, particularly those which could distinguish it from other communities. Other anthropologists are interested in what is called material culture. For instance, pottery, vehicles, and its clothing. Yet, Goodenough's concept, taking cultures as a social acquired knowledge, should be followed by sociolinguists. He states that society's culture consists of whatever it is one has to know or believe in order to operate in a manner acceptable to its members. Culture being what people have to learn as distinct from their biological heritages. Most consist of the end product of learning, knowledge, in a most general sense of the term. The advantage of adopting this view is that it will allow us to compare culture with language, which we are also taking to be a kind of knowledge. So, from this slide, we first know what anthropologists or how anthropologists define culture. They define it as something that everybody has in contrast with a culture which is found only in cultured circles. Although they differ in their using of this term, but it always refers to some features shared by a community, specifically these features which distinguish one community from the other. Some anthropologists are interested in material culture. So what is meant by material cultures? Material cultures, the substance, the interest in the substance, or all building, museums, cars, butcheries, and the old uniform of the group of people or community or certain society, and the like. The second important point we talked about here in this slide is Goodenough's concepts, who view culture as a socially acquired knowledge. So, culture is a kind of knowledge which is socially acquired. He says that society's cultures consist of all the things that individual has to adopt and act in a manner accepted by his or her community. We, as a language students, should adopt this view because it allows us to compare culture with language, which is also a kind of knowledge. Here, he means language. After a minute, I mentioned that according to Goodenough's, of course, and Hitson, they mentioned that cultures is a kind of knowledge which is which is socially acquired. Now we, in the end of the slide, we see that we talked about language as also a kind of what? A kind of knowledge. We will talk about, or this point will be clear when we will talk about the contact between language and culture. Second, what is meant by thought? From the picture, we notice that thoughts contain other terms, which are memory, inference, concepts, and propositions. The term thought covers a number of different types of mental activity and lies in the providence of cognitive psychology. To clarify the discussion in this object, Hitson states that we should differentiate between memory and inference and between concepts and propositions. So what is meant by memory? Memory is the process in which information is encoded, is stored in our head, in our brain. Inference is a mental process by which we reached a conclusion based on specific evidence. A proposition can be defined as a statement or a problem that must be solved or proved to be true or not true. For example, Austinian theory is the linguistics of propositions that our speech consists of three main acts: locutionary, allocutionary, and perlocutionary acts. Concepts has been defined as abstract ideas or general notions that occurs in the mind, in speech, or in thoughts. They are understood to be the fundamental building blocks of the thoughts and beliefs. They play an important role in all aspects of cognition. As such, concepts are studied by several disciplines such as linguistics, psychology, and philosophy. And these disciplines are interested in the logical and psychological structure of concepts and how they are put together to form thoughts and sentences. The points we should focus on here in this slides are thoughts, which means different types of mental activity. In order to clarify this concept, Hitson drew a distinction between memory. Memory is the process in which information or data is encoded, stored in our brain. Inference, which means a process takes place in our mind or in our brain, and by which we work out and draw a conclusion concerning the phenomena or various phenomena around us. Based on what? Based on prepositions. Prepositions can be defined. A preposition is a statement or a problem that must be solved or proved to be true or not. For example, we have Austin theory. Austin theory, it is regarded as a preposition. Austin proposed that our speech consists of three main acts. Concepts is the abstract ideas, notions that occur in our mind, in our speech, or in our thoughts. Several such as linguistics, psychology, and philosophy. Now we will watch a video to Noam Chomsky. He will clarify the connections or the relation between language and thought.
Language, which I think are being systematically refuted, and they're held by linguists too, I should say, not just the general public, which are probably false, which I think are being undermined by current research. This is a minority view. I'm not speaking for the profession. The introductory comment said that I'm supposed to be contrarian, so I try to keep to that. But for example, one general assumption about language, almost a dogma in philosophy, common understanding, linguistics, psychology, is that language is primarily a means of communication, and that it evolved as a means of communication. Probably that's totally false. It seems that language is evolved and is designed as a mode of creating and interpreting thought. It's a system of thought, basically. It can be used to communicate. Everything people do can be used to communicate. You communicate by your hairstyle, style of walk, everything. And yes, language can be used to communicate, but it doesn't seem to be part of its design. Its design seems to be radically different, and in fact even seems to undermine communication. If you look carefully at the structure of language, you find case after case right at the core of language design where there are conflicts between what would be efficient for communication and what is efficient for the specific biological design of language. And in every case that's known, communicative efficiency is sacrificed. It just isn't a consideration. And I think that's a conclusion that has very widespread significance. In order to establish it, you have to look at technical work. It's not the kind of thing you can explain in 2 minutes of exposition. But it's not profound. It's not quantum physics. A half an hour would certainly suffice. And I think it's a pretty far-reaching consequence. Another general belief about language, again, almost a dogma in all the relevant fields, philosophy, linguistics, and so on, is that the minimal meaningful elements in language, sort of word-like things, pick out entities in the extramental world. So the word, say, river, picks out the Charles River, and so on, something that a physicist could identify. That turns out to be true for animal systems, animal communication systems. The symbols that appear, the actions that are carried out, do apparently have a one-to-one correlation with mind-independent events. So some particular call of a monkey will be related to leaves fluttering, predators coming, sort of, I'm hungry, some hormonal change. It's just not true of language. Like linguistic elements do not have that property.
So, what we conclude from Chomsky's speech is that language is not primarily designed to communicate. It could be a means of communication, but its primarily or basic function is not to communicate, since a human can communicate through semiotic sources. They can communicate something by their dress, by their hairstyle, by their movement, facial expressions. So the human can communicate by using semiotics resource or semiotic systems or signals. He says that language is basically designed and evolved to interpret our thoughts. So here we from this speech we can recognize the correlations and the strong connections between language and thought. Then, the third question we will tackle in this lecture is, what is the relation between thought and culture? Culture, as we mentioned before, is a socially acquired knowledge. Therefore, it is regarded as one part of memory, namely the part which is acquired socially. It might be distinguished between propositions which are known to be true from one's own experience and those which have been learned from other people. Sometimes we work out or build knowledge without help from others as a convenient way of interpreting our experience. This is called non-cultural concept. Kinds of knowledge. Hitson mentioned 3 kinds of knowledge. First kind is cultural knowledge, which is learned from other people. Second, shared non-cultural knowledge, which is shared by people within the same community or the world over, but is not learned from each other. Third, non-shared non-cultural knowledge, which is unique to the individual. Most of language is cultural knowledge, since it has to be learned from others, but some is shared non-cultural knowledge. Okay, in this slide, we tackled the question, what is the relation between thought and culture? We already has defined culture, and we say that cultures is a set of beliefs or values that are shared between a group of people or between the community. And according to Goodenough's concepts, cultures is something socially acquired. It's a kind of knowledge that we acquired it socially. So, according to this concept or this definition, culture is a kind of what? A kind of knowledge. This knowledge, how it is made, how the culture knowledge build up in our mind, in our brain, through the process of thoughts. The process of thoughts, which contain memory, inference, concepts, propositions, these processes that made the knowledge. And one type of this knowledge that are made, one type of these knowledge that are made through this process, which is the thought process, is cultural knowledge. we have, or Hitson mentioned three types of knowledge. Hitson mentioned three kinds of knowledge. First one is cultural knowledge. What's meant by cultural knowledge? Cultural knowledge is the knowledge that we learn from other people, from the members of our community. We learn this culture from our environment, from our society that we grow up in. For example, in Muslims communities, we learn how to pray from other members of the community. So this type of knowledge is called cultural knowledge. Cultural knowledge it either acquired directly by the instructions of the older and other members of the community, or indirectly by imitation cultural knowledge. It either acquired directly by the instruction of other individuals or people in our community, or indirectly by imitations or by learn it by imitations other individual in our community. The second type of knowledge, shared non-cultural knowledge, which is shared by people within the same community. They share the same type of knowledge, but they don't learn this type of knowledge from each other. This type is shared by all the people in the community, but they don't learn it from each other. Touch, or when for example, the child, when he touch the fire, he will burn himself. So he will there will be a knowledge and in his mind that this thing or this substance will burn him if he touch it. So he experiences this by himself. Nobody else has told him about it. So we could regard this as an example on shared non-cultural knowledge. This type of knowledge is unique to the individual. Someone or a member has this knowledge, other doesn't have it. Example on this type, on this type of knowledge, people who are specialized in mathematics, they have knowledge which is non-shared and non-cultural. No one have that type of knowledge if he isn't specialized in this field. Also, linguists have this type of knowledge. They are specialized in linguistics, so they have non-shared, non-cultural knowledge. Other member of the community or the society maybe have they don't have this knowledge. The most of language is cultural. Language that we share in our the language that we share with our community, it's mostly cultural language. Language we learn, we acquired it from the community, from the people surround us. So language is a cultural knowledge since it has been learned from other, but some is shared non-cultural knowledge, but some is shared non-cultural knowledge. Shared non-cultural Culture may be defined as the kind of knowledge which we learn from other people, either by direct instruction or by watching their behavior. Since we learn our culture from those around us, we may assume that we share it with them. So this kind of knowledge is likely to play a major role when we communicate with them, and in particular when we use language. The same will be true for any knowledge that we share with other people, regardless whether we learn it from them or not. Our knowledge consists of a wide network of concepts correlated by prepositions. Here, in this slide, we remind or review the concept of culture. We have already mentioned that culture is something acquired from or learned from the community that we live in. This kind of knowledge, which is cultural knowledge, this kind of knowledge, it is acquired in two ways, either in direct way by instruction or watching the behavior of the members in our community, or we learn it from the circumstances around us. Since we share this type of knowledge with the community or the society where we live in, so this kind of knowledge will play a major role in our communicate with them. Knowledge consists of a wide network of concepts, correlated by prepositions. We know previously, we have explained previously what is meant by the term concept. It is any idea, notion that we find in our thought, in our speech. And prepositions is a statement that could be true or could be false. So, what's the relation between concepts and prepositions? Concepts maybe are abstract notions, abstract ideas. These abstract ideas are linked by what? Linked by prepositions. These concepts, we link them. If we have more than one concept, we link them by what? By prepositions. To make what? To make a content. In the following controversy, here we have three controversy points need to be considered. The nature of concepts. A negative judge on the idea that concepts have a definition, a set of necessary and sufficient prepositions, which are distinct from all the other prepositions that mentioned them. Any prepositions may be overridden in exceptional cases. So, although typical birds do fly, some exceptional birds do not. For example, pigeons, and ostrich. The nature of concepts. A negative judge on the idea that concepts have a definition, a set of necessary and sufficient a set of necessary and sufficient prepositions which are distinct from all the other prepositions that mention them. And prepositions may be overridden in exceptional cases. So although typical birds do fly, some exceptional birds do not. For example, pigeons and ostrich. The distinction between concepts and percepts, which are the outcome of direct perception, such as a smell, a taste, a sound, they don't depend on prepositions for their content in the way that concepts like bird do, but they can be involved in prepositions. For example, the prepositions that the smell of paint is less pleasant than the smell of roses. The third distinction between knowing that and knowing how, sometimes called declarative and procedural knowledge. Knowing how to ride a bicycle or how to speak English is probably a different kind of knowledge from knowing that a bicycle has two wheels or that cat is an English word, but the issue is complicated and not directly relevant to our topic, so we will ignore it. In this slide, we talk about 3 points of debate about the term concept. We should take in consideration. We should take these 3 points or 3 debates about the concepts in consideration. First, the nature of concepts. The nature of concepts. A negative judged on the idea that concepts has a definition. So there is a debate on the negative judge on the idea that concepts has a definition. What is this definition? The definition is a set of necessary and sufficient prepositions which are distinct from all the other prepositions that mention them. Any prepositions may be overridden in exceptional cases. What this mean? For example, if we take the concept of fly and bird. Bird is a concept and fly is a concept. The concept bird has some features. For example, to refer to anything or any creatures as a bird, it should have certain features such as feathers, beak, he can fly, and so on. But some birds, just like penguins and ostrich, they couldn't fly. So the prepositions that birds fly is overridden in this case, in this exceptional case. So the prepositions sometimes are overridden. The second debate is the distinction between concepts and percepts. Percepts are what? Percepts are the outcome of direct perceptions, such as smell, taste, sound. They don't depend on prepositions for their content. We know that concepts are linked connections by prepositions, and the prepositions, after linking many concepts, will make what? Will make a content. For example, the concept to fly and the concept, for example, the concepts oil, water, float. These concepts, we will link them by prepositions. So the prepositions will be oil, floats on the water. This concept, these prepositions make content, make from the concepts, make a content. But in the case of percepts, the prepositions doesn't make their content in the way that he make with the water or with the bird, but they can be involved in prepositions. The prepositions doesn't make their contents but they can be involved in prepositions. For example, the smell of paint is less pleasant than the smell of roses. We make what? We make a content. We make prepositions by linking these concepts together. The third distinction between knowing that and knowing how. What we mean by knowing that and what we mean by knowing how. Knowing that, for example, I know that the cow has 4 legs and the bicycle have 2 wheels. This kind of knowledge is called knowing that. Knowing how is to know how to do things. For example, knowing how to speak English, knowing how to tie notes, and the like, or knowing how to ride a bicycle. The first type of knowledge is called declarative. Knowing that is a declarative knowledge, and knowing how is a procedural knowledge. Knowing how to ride a bicycle, how to speak English, is probably different kind of knowing from knowing that a bicycle has 2 wheels and a cat is an English verb. These examples clarify the idea. But this issue is not directly relevant to our topic here, so we will ignore it. Now, language makes contact with culture through the following 4 points. Language consists of concepts and prepositions. Linguistics items are categories which we use to analyze our experience, that is, as concepts. For example, a combination of phonological, syntactic, and semantic properties are presented by every lexical item in the same way that the concept vegetables represents a combination of properties to do with when the object is eaten, where it grows and its flavor. Most of linguistics items are defined in terms of prototypes, just as non-linguistics concepts, which is why it is often impossible to draw a distinction between good and bad sentences. For example, the typical subject of a verb, such as cook, is the person who does the cooking. Mary cooked the meat, but it can also be the instrument, the oven cooked the meat, or even the thing cooked, the meat cooked well. The prototype subject of cook combine a number of different properties, including being agent and having primary responsibility, but it is possible to generalize from this combination to cases where the subject merely has a primary responsibility for the cooking, such as the oven cooked the meat. The oven cooked the meat. If even this feature is absent, the sentence becomes much less acceptable, as in the suspense cooked the meat. The second point is meanings are concepts and propositions. There is widespread agreement that the meaning of a linguistics item is its sense, that is, what is permanent about its relation to the word rather than its reference. The objects or events to which it refers or particular occasions more controversially. However, we can go on to identify the scenes of an item with the concepts to which it is related in the speaker's memory. In other words, with the concepts that the item expresses. For instance, the sense of the word cat is the concept cat, which may well have existed in the person's memory before they ever learned the word to express it. More complex items, such as sentences, express propositions rather than concepts. But again, these are part of knowledge. In fact, they are the main vehicle for transforming knowledge from one person's mind to another's. The third point is understanding and using speech involves the whole of knowledge. There are a great deal of knowledge which has nothing in itself to do with language. This is the area of pragmatics, the study of how we use language. Pragmatics is the study of how we use language. If we hear someone says he kissed her, we have to use a great deal of non-linguistics knowledge in order to work out who the people concerned are. When the reported event happened, how reliable the report is, what conclusions can be drawn, and so on. The mental process that take place in our minds are called inference. The hearer infers what the speaker intends, and the speaker infers the best way to express the message. So inference is like a mental collocation. Inference is like a mental collocation. The last point is linguistically relevant social categories are concepts. Speakers located themselves in a multi-dimensional space in relation to the rest of their society, and located each act of speaking in multi-dimensional space in relation to the rest of their social lives. Hitson suggested that each dimension is defined by a particular concept of a typical type of person or typical situation. This view allows us to predict many phenomena which are in fact found in sociolinguistics, such as domains, the metaphorical code switching, and the different degree to which people's speech identifies them with particular groups. Conclusion. Culture is the kind of knowledge which we learn from other people either by direct instruction or by watching their behavior. There are three controversy points about concepts need to be considered: the nature of concepts, the distinction between concepts and percepts, and the third distinction between knowing that and knowing how. Language makes contact with culture through the following 4 points. Language consists of concepts and prepositions, meaning are concepts and prepositions underlying and using speech involves the whole of knowledge, and linguistically relevant social categories are concepts. Thank you for your watching. I hope it